Hi, I'm Terri Allard with WHTJ and WCVE PBS. We're here at the University of Virginia. It is the Virginia Film Festival week. Our guest is Lynn Novick, co-producer and co-director along with Ken Burns of the new PBS series, The Vietnam War. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And welcome to Charlottesville.
It's great to be here.
So you and Ken Burns have worked on many PBS projects together,
Yes,
and you've covered so many topics from prohibition to jazz to baseball and World War II.
Yeah.
Why the Vietnam War, and why now?
You know, we started thinking about this project many years ago. It's been kind of on the back burner, the back of our minds, because the Vietnam War is the most important event in American history since World War II. Mm-hmm. It's one of the most divisive and polarizing, and given how important it is, it's astonishing how little we really know about what happened. And so we've always wanted to tackle it. For a while, it felt like it was actually too recent. And in 2006, we decided, okay, we're finishing up our film on the Second World War. We have a deeper understanding about what it means to go to war and how it affects individuals and a nation. And now we're ready to tackle Vietnam, which we knew would be difficult. It turned out to be the most challenging experience of our professional lives, psychically, creatively, sort of just organizationally, in every way. It was extremely difficult and, not paradoxically, extremely rewarding.
Well, it was 10 years in the making.
It was.
And you chose to tell it from so many different perspectives. You've got the U.S. veteran,
right,
South Vietnamese veteran, North and Viet Cong veterans,
yeah,
protesters, leaders, policymakers. Why did you decide to tell it from a 360-degree narrative, and how in the world did you pull that off?
Well, we felt from the beginning that we wanted to tell the story from the perspective of ordinary people, because so often, you know, we hear about the decisions made in the Oval Office or at the Pentagon, and then we have these abstract numbers. And in Vietnam, we know that 58,000 Americans lost their lives in the war. But what does that really mean? Who are those people? What happened to them and their families?
Right.
And we know that it tore our country apart. And so why did it tear our country apart, and why is it still so toxic and such this sort of raw nerve? And we felt that we could really get access to that by talking to ordinary people who lived through it from all sides. And then on top of that, we felt, you know, Americans have always made the mistake when we think about the Vietnam War, thinking that it's only an American story. And how can you possibly, even if you don't care about Vietnamese people, if you don't care about what happened there, even if you only care about America, you can't understand it without understanding what it meant if you were Vietnamese. And in fact, we did care about what happened to the Vietnamese people, what they did, what they suffered, how they fought, who they were, because our leaders at the time did not understand anything about that. They didn't know our enemy, and they didn't know our ally. And Vietnamese were both, and we felt it was sort of essential, kind of an article of faith from day one, that we would try to do that. Doing it, however, was an altogether different thing.
How did you get these interviews?
Yeah, so we had access at a very high level with the Vietnamese government, and we explained to them that we wanted to tell the human story of the war. What was it like for ordinary people? And they said, you know, we never really think about the war that way, and we never tell the story that way, and it would be good for our people to know, and it would be great for the American people to know. And so how can we help you? And we had extraordinary access both to people and to archives. And we were able to talk to whomever we wanted, ask them anything we wanted. And we had a wonderful Vietnamese producer, Ho Dang Hoa, who lives in Hanoi. And he helped us not just communicate in terms of translation, but find people. So we would find an American veteran who was in a particular battle, let's say Hill 875 in Dak To in the fall of '67. We had Matthew Harrison, who was a West Point graduate. And we wanted to find a North Vietnamese counterpart to Matt Harrison. That took Hoa a year, because there's very few veterans that survived that battle.
Right.
And he did find Colonel Stone, who was very happy to talk with us. No one had ever asked him to tell his story. And that, you could just multiply that out over and over again in Vietnam.
I've been hearing that, and when people say no one's ever asked me to tell the story.
That's a profound thing, I think, on a human level, of just being genuinely interested in another person, and who are they and what happened to them and how that has shaped them. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. And
clearly.
Yeah, it's an incredible privilege to just talk to people and find out these, you know, intimate details of their lives. And so we had that over and over again, that, you know, people were open and willing to share things that they don't usually talk about.
Was there ever a time during the production in those 10 years when you thought to yourselves, oh, what are we doing? Or was it always, did it always feel as if this had momentum and you were on the right track for 10 years?
You know, we have a process, and I've worked with Ken long enough, and with our producer Sarah Botstein, our writer Jeff Ward. We've worked together on many projects since Jazz. That's more than 20 years.
Yeah.
So we kind of know how to do what we do. But even so, there are many moments when you sort of wake up and think, oh my God, I don't know if this is going to work. But you just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. Like, it's like life. You just have to keep doing it. And if you have faith in the process, and also I think in the, at least for me, I have faith in the extraordinary talents of the people that we collaborate with. And so I just know someone's going to figure out how this is all going to fit together, and we're all going to do that together.
Yeah.
And we collected a lot of material that we didn't end up using, and then we didn't find things we hoped we would find, but there's kind of an organic, intuitive process. And, you know, yeah, you don't solve every problem, but you solve enough of them that you make hopefully a coherent film in the end.
Oh, it's an excellent film. And you're talking about, let's talk about your advisors. So tonight at the Film Fest, you're here participating with Marc Silverstone, who is here in Charlottesville. He is the chair of the Presidential Recordings Program at the Miller Center at UVA, and he's quite a scholar.
He is.
And he was an advisor on the film.
Yes, it was very important to us as this project, this subject is sort of unsettled history. It's very divisive in our society, and even among scholars, there's not a lot of consensus about what happened. And so, so we had to have an advisory panel that represented many points of view. American and Vietnamese, conservative, liberal, social historians, military historians, presidential historians, the whole gamut.
And within those, they didn't always agree too, right?
No.
I know.
Absolutely not. One of our favorite things of this project was listening to our advisors argue at the meetings. I mean, it was fantastic. We learned so much.
Yeah.
And sometimes we would realize, oh, we're not going to be able to say definitively what happened here. That's great. So that happened over and over again. But particularly, we're grateful that we had the chance to work with Marc Silverstone. One of our producers, Mariah Duran, worked most closely with him. And her job really was to help us understand the presidential audio recordings that are here, that are a treasure trove, an extraordinary resource, a window into leadership and what happens, how the wheels of government spin, the inner workings of these administrations that made these extraordinarily important decisions.
And what a great part of the narrative of this series.
Yes, you bet. So it was, you know, trying to really eavesdrop on these private conversations between LBJ and McNamara, between Nixon and Kissinger, listening to President Kennedy record his thoughts about the coup that he approved that ended up in the assassination of two leaders of South Vietnam. You know, it's hearing their real voices and the intonations and what they say, what they don't say, the tone of voice, who they're talking to, what's going on in the background. I mean, you learn so much from this material. It is a priceless resource for historians and for our country, for our civic understanding of what it means to live in this democracy. And Marc Silverstone has been our Virgil through this process. We could not have done it without him. I think Mariah talked to him every week for several years. And it would be, the kind of conversation would be, look, we have this scene and it's about the Gulf of Tonkin. LBJ probably talked to 50 people over those 3 days.
Right.
Which conversations do you think we should listen to? Because we can't listen to all of them. We don't know what's on them because they're not all transcribed. So Marc would say, let me get back to you. And then he'd send us 3 options. And he'd say, go to this day, this time, this, you know, this conversation at this time, and see what you think. And you can multiply that out over several years, and you can see how we could not have made this film without Marc Silverstone.
Yeah, and you had many advisors. So you had other historians, you had veterans, of course.
Yes.
Many.
We felt always that we had to have veterans in the room, preferably American and Vietnamese, helping us get it right. And getting it right is no small task in a subject like this.
No.
Yeah.
Well, what has the response been to the film
response,
so far?
Wow. I mean, I would say it has exceeded my expectations by several orders of magnitude. I could not have imagined. Not just the number of viewers, which the ratings were huge, and that's wonderful, but also there was a conversation. There is a conversation going on about this time, and that's why we made the film, because we felt very strongly that it's extremely difficult to talk about what happened and to take responsibility as a country for things that we did and didn't do, and to really face the truth honestly, and only when we do that can we have reconciliation.
Yeah.
And we've seen it happening. I mean, at screenings, and Ken and I did a number of events over the summer leading up to the broadcast, and one of the things I will never forget was we did an event in Kansas City, and John Musgrave, who's one of the most compelling veterans in the film, was on stage with us, and someone came up to him and said, you know, I've seen the clips, he hadn't seen the film yet, but I grew up in the same town as you, And I want to say thank you for your service. I did not go to Vietnam, this man was saying. He said, I got out of it. I didn't want to go. I protested the war. And I think I was right, but I'm really sorry for the things we said. And he held John Musgrave's hand and he kept saying, I'm sorry. And that was an extraordinary moment, you know.
Yeah.
Both people can be right. It can be right to go to war. It can be right to protest against a war that you think is wrong. And it's also right to sort of focus the attention on the leaders who made the decisions that put us there and not the soldiers. And I think that's been happening, and it's really been profound to see.
Yeah.
Among many other conversations.
And the conversation, this series has given PBS stations across the country an opportunity to reach out to their communities and start that conversation about this war and this time in history. And because of this, there has been so much community outreach, educational community outreach across the country. And in our communities in Charlottesville and Richmond, we've hosted over a dozen events, panel discussions, art exhibits, presentations to educators, screenings, preview screenings. And we've also given veterans and families in our community an opportunity and a platform to tell their stories on the website, television, radio, social media, and in a beautiful traveling exhibit.
Just looking around, it's beautiful.
And the response has been so very positive.
It really is music to our ears. I think that's why we made the film ultimately, because we only could tell, we interviewed 100 people, 79 are in the film. There's millions of people. Everyone in America has a story to tell about this era. You don't have to be a veteran, you don't have to be a Vietnamese American. Everyone who lived through it has something to say about it. And it's profoundly influenced who we are today, and just making connections across these various divides that we experience in our society. We have to do that, and this story is an important way to do it.
And this was a goal from the beginning then, to really see this conversation spreading out across for the first time.
I really couldn't have imagined how that would work, and I think part of it is the growth of social media and the way that we can communicate. So 2006, I don't think I really could have imagined how social media would play such an incredible role in connecting people. It's amazing, and I'm still learning, and we're still getting the feedback from stations, like the stations here, about how this worked and what's still going on. It's amazing.
Yeah. So I got to ask you, what's next?
Well, as it happens, Ken Burns and I have some projects in development.
Do you ever take a break?
Yes, I'm going to take a little break, I think, around the holidays, for sure. Ken, I'm afraid I cannot say. He went right into a screening of a film he's working on with his partner Dayton Duncan about country music.
I saw that.
He jumped out of the front van into the fire. I don't know how he did it. I was exhausted, but he just kept going full speed ahead. I'm working on a film, this is my first time directing on my own, about people who are incarcerated who are attending college behind bars in New York State. Most people who are incarcerated don't have access to higher education.
Right.
And so that's one of the reasons why the recidivism rate is so high. And also, so many people who are incarcerated have not had the benefit of a college education before they went to prison. So it's a remarkable film about some extraordinary people who have, many of them committed really heinous acts and are trying to redeem themselves and transform themselves through studying the kind of liberal arts education that I had the benefit of going to an Ivy League school. They're getting behind bars. And it's been a really inspiring and heartbreaking at the same time. And so that's coming out next year on PBS. And Ken and I are working on a film about Ernest Hemingway, a biography of Ernest Hemingway. So that's going to be a complete change of pace in every way. And then we're talking about a big series about the history of crime and punishment, how we got where we are with mass incarceration, and where did this come from, going back to the beginning. And a biography or a mini-series about LBJ's presidency, because we got so fascinated with LBJ and these audio tapes and who was this man, and sort of new insights you can gain from as a filmmaker using this material. So we're going to be back at the Miller Center again, working with Marc, I hope.
Yeah, that is so exciting. Well, I can't thank you enough for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Are you kidding? We are at the University of Virginia. Again, this is the week of the Virginia Film Festival, and we want to thank you, VA, for hosting us today. Thank you so much. If you are interested in watching the PBS documentary series, The Vietnam War, it is on demand through our Passport program, and you can reach that by going to ideastations.org/ /Vietnam War. And Lynn, thank you so much again.
Thank you so much for having me. It was wonderful.